in terms of legal issues. So thanks, Natalie, for coming in. That's great of you.
My pleasure, and it's delightful to be here. So welcome to all of you. I've got a few slides, so I am going to just try and share my screen. Let's see if that will work. Brilliant.
That's great.
Does that work okay, Sam? Can I
Yep.
Yes, there we go. So my name's Natalie Gamble. I'm a solicitor from the UK, and just to give you a bit of an introduction about kind of my experience and where I've come from, I am the founder of NJ Law, which is a law firm here in the UK that specialises in surrogacy. We were the first to do so, and this is really work that we do on a daily basis, and we have done for many, many years. I personally have dealt with nearly 2,000 surrogacy cases, and at NJ Law we provide the kind of full package of legal support for whatever parents need. So that's advice, wills, dealing with parentage orders, British nationality and passports, and bringing babies home as well. I'm also the co-founder of Brilliant Beginnings, which is one of the UK's non-profit surrogacy organisations. And my partner Helen and I founded Brilliant Beginnings in 2013 to help people with more of the practical aspects of managing surrogacy, because we really wanted to help people do it in a way that was safe and ethical. And the work we do at Brilliant Beginnings includes a specific US surrogacy pathway. So we do kind of deal with the practicalities as well as the legal issues. And as Sam mentioned, we've always been champions of the surrogacy community and kind of helped to push things forward wherever we can. So winning inclusion, for example, for same-sex parents and single parents. We've been heavily involved in law reform for many, many years, kind of pushing for wider reform, but also kind of other issues like maternity leave rights and so on. And when things have happened around the world, we've been involved in kind of finding solutions and really advocating for parents as a group. So things like COVID and the Ukraine war. And we've worked very closely with Growing Families and Sam when things like that have happened. To talk you through how UK law fits in if you are thinking of a surrogacy journey in either the US or Canada. And I know we've got some other speakers this afternoon to talk about the legal framework at the destination end. But as you probably know, under US or Canadian law, you as the intended parents will be recognised as your child's legal parents, and you'll be recorded on your child's birth certificate as such in the place where your child is born. But unfortunately, UK law doesn't recognise that automatically. So for UK law purposes, it will be your surrogate who's treated as the legal mother. And if she's married, then her spouse will be the legal father or other parent if she's in a same-sex marriage. And for UK parents, what that means is that you then have to go through an additional post-birth UK legal process to become the legal parents of your child here in the UK. And that legal process is typically a full solution, which will make you full legal parents, and it will also make your child a British citizen if either of you is British. Now, normally the solution that's designed for surrogacy is something called a parental order, which is what I'm going to talk through this afternoon. But we also sometimes deal with cases where people don't qualify for the parental order for various reasons. So it's worth flagging just that other routes are available. So if your situation is a bit more complicated, then please do feel free to ask questions, and I can explain some of the other ways of dealing with things. First of all, looking at the issues around bringing your baby back home to the UK. Well, one of the big advantages of going to the US or Canada, as opposed to other destinations where this isn't the case, is that your child will be able to secure a US or a Canadian passport simply because they've been born there. And because there is a visa waiver arrangement between both US and Canada and the UK, it's possible for your child to travel back home to the UK with you using their US or Canadian passport without any kind of visa. Now, in practical terms, you will be relying on the discretion of the border officer when you arrive, but we have never, across many hundreds, thousands of cases, seen any children denied entry at the border. So it does work in terms of coming home, and it means that there isn't a long delay after the birth before you can get home safely. But you then also need to have a plan in place about when you're going to apply for your child's UK passport and a good understanding of what you will need to do. So if you are applying for a parental order, most parents will wait until they've got their UK parental order sorted to apply for the UK passport. And that's because the application at that stage of things is very straightforward. You can make a UK passport for an application for a child before you've got your parental order if either of the intended parents is British, but it can be quite a complex application, and it may involve a step where you have to ask the Home Office to grant British nationality. So if for any reason you're not applying for a parental order or you need a passport more urgently, it's worth getting advice on what you will need to do to get a UK passport for your child. To talk you through the parental order process, this is the court process that, as I mentioned, most parents follow in order to secure their parentage for UK law purposes. And it is a solution that's designed specifically for surrogacy cases. So the only parents who apply for a parental order are parents through surrogacy. And just to give you a feel for the kind of numbers, we know that for the last 3 years, there have been around 400 parental order applications granted by the UK court each year on average. Of those, about half involve parents who have conceived through surrogacy here in the UK, and the other half involve parents who have conceived overseas. So it's very common to go overseas for surrogacy. And out of the 200 or so cases that go through the court each year involving international surrogacy, around half involve surrogacy arrangements in the USA, and about 1/10 involve surrogacy arrangements in Canada. So it just gives you a feel for kind of how common this is. Now, the parental order application is a post-birth court application, which will be heard by a High Court judge sitting in the family court. It takes a little while, and there is quite a kind of rigorous approach to the information that the court requires. So you will be expected to file detailed evidence explaining your story and backing that up with all the supporting documentation, and also a full court bundle, which gives the court all the information that it needs. There will also, as part of the process, be a welfare assessment, which is conducted by CAFCAS. That's the Child and Family Court Advisory and Support Service. So essentially social workers who work for the court system. Now, it's a fairly light touch welfare assessment, so not as it would be if you were applying, for example, to adopt a child, but there will be a home visit and some background checks that are carried out before a social worker files a report for the judge, which recommends whether the order is in your child's best interests. Now, in terms of timescales, you are expected to make the application within 6 months of the birth. You don't have to wait 6 weeks to apply. That's a very common myth that we see circulated quite a lot. And the application process itself will take at least 5 to 9 months to get from the point of application to the point of a court hearing. Now, you may be lucky and have a final order made at your first court hearing, and certainly when we're helping parents, that's what we're aiming to achieve. But if the judge doesn't have all the information they need, they may send you away to gather more information, and then you'll have additional hearings following that. And ultimately, at the end of the process, you will become your child's full and equal legal parents if there's 2 of you, or a full sole parent if you're a single parent, and just as if your child had been born to you. So you'll have the same rights and status as any other parents. And the General Register Office in the UK will issue your child with a birth certificate which confirms that status. And that is, if you like, your insurance document that you can use in the future in order to make clear to any officials that you have full status as your child's legal parents. What does the court want to know in this application process? So there's a number of criteria that you have to meet, and this is what all that evidence and court bundle I was talking about need to address and satisfy the court on. So in relation to you as the applicant or applicants, you have to show that at least one of you is the biological parent of your child. So it's fine to use donor eggs or donor sperm if you're a couple, but not both. And if you're a single parent, you need to be the biological parent. If you're applying as a couple, then you either have to be married to each other or living as partners in an enduring family relationship. At least one of you, if you're a couple, or you, if you're a single applicant, has to be domiciled in the UK. And just to flag here that domicile can be a slightly tricky thing. It's not just about where you're living, it's about the kind of whole history of your background and your future intentions as well. So it's something to get particular advice on if either you weren't born in the UK and you subsequently settled here, or if you're originally British but you're living outside the UK. In both those scenarios, there may be a question mark around domicile, but also to flag that if you're British and living outside the UK, you can apply for a parental order. You don't need to be resident in the UK at the time of your application. You also have to be over 18. And then in respect of your surrogate and her spouse, you will need their consent to the parental order being granted, and this is the bit that has to be done after 6 weeks. So your surrogate's consent is only valid if it's given more than 6 weeks after the birth. In practice, the process of getting consent from your surrogate is usually a paperwork exercise. But one of the lovely things about COVID and the fact that a lot of the hearings were taking place online is that we have seen surrogates participate in the court hearings because they've wanted to do that and show support for their intended parents. So that is possible if that's what they would wish as well. The third issue that I put on here around authorization payments beyond expenses. This is now relatively routine, but I guess it is the most controversial of the issues around the criteria in the parental order legislation, because the law originally was designed to discourage parents from entering into compensated surrogacy arrangements. But in practice, lots of parents go overseas to places where that's permitted and the norm, and that's fine. But you will need to give the court a very clear breakdown of everything that you've paid and clarity about whether it's just expenses or not. Usually in US surrogacy cases, it's very clearly not, and there is an element of compensation. In Canadian cases, it's more kind of in the framework of expenses. But if there are payments beyond expenses, the court will need to authorize those. So you'll need to show that there was no exploitation, that you've acted in good faith, and that the order is in your child's best interests. And then finally, the last issue is the welfare of your child. And provided you meet all the criteria, this is the court's paramount consideration. As I've mentioned, there's a welfare assessment as part of the process, which is quite light touch. And, you know, generally speaking, in surrogacy cases, it's acknowledged that you are your child's parents and that you've already been looking after them, and there aren't really any other prospects. But it is something that the court will take into account. I just wanted to mention briefly law reform, and Sam mentioned this at the beginning as well, that we've been fighting for many years for law reform in the UK, and the Law Commission has been working on a project for the last 4 years now about bringing the law up to date. They made some provisional proposals in 2019, and their final report is due in a few months' time. We are looking forward to that report, but we are very much hoping that the Law Commission has listened to some of the things that we said in response to their provisional proposals, which did not recommend significant change for parents going overseas. So most of the reform proposals are around UK surrogacy. So if you are thinking of doing surrogacy abroad, or if you are in the process of doing so, I would strongly say please do get involved in these law reform discussions. There's more information on the Brilliant Beginnings website about how you can write to your MP, sign petitions, and do other things to get involved. But this is an issue that's soon to be on the public agenda. So, you know, if you have a personal interest, there will certainly be opportunities for you to contribute. So thank you very much. I hope that was a helpful whistle-stop tour. I've got our website and contact details here. I'm conscious there's probably lots of questions that I won't have had time to cover. So I'll be online for the rest of this afternoon if anybody wants to type any questions in the Q&A. And, you know, also you can email or contact us outside of this, and we're happy to help.
That's great. Thanks so much, Natalie. Just one question I've got for you is, are you finding most children born, say, in the USA for UK nationals are coming back into the UK on the US passport?
Yeah, that's been the case for many years.
Yeah.
And, you know, typically parents get waved through without any particular questions. I had some clients arrive this morning all set up in case they had any problems, and they emailed me to say they've just got waved through, no problems. Occasionally you'll get a border officer who's less experienced or a bit nervous, and you then do get a little bit more of a grilling. So it's always worth being very well prepared for that. So I would say, you know, carry your US legal documents with you. For parents that we're working with on the parental order, we typically provide a letter to say, this is what the legal position is in the UK, it's all going to be resolved, we're applying for the parental order. And clients often say that's quite helpful at the border if they do get questions. Yeah, okay, look, that's great, thank you so much. I'm going to now introduce you to our next speaker, Dr. Jovanovic, who's actually I've had the pleasure of hanging out with in Dublin this weekend for our conference there. So Dr. Jovanovic is a IVF specialist. He runs a centre called Tree of Life in California. As many of you will know, California is really the hub for US best practice in IVF techniques. He's double board certified in reproductive endocrinology and infertility. And he's a great advocate for gay singles and couples in terms of engaging in family building. He's a great asset to have as a partner for growing families, so we're really happy to have him here. He's going to talk to us a bit today about maximising success. The IVF process is one of the pricier parts of
of surrogacy. So we're going to talk a bit about how you can, what you can do when you're engaging with donor IVF or adding a surrogate in terms of maximising the chance of things working out. So look, welcome. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Thank you very much, Sam. And thank you for the wonderful event we had here in Dublin yesterday. And I want to welcome all the viewers and all the basically seminar takers today. Yeah, I wanted to just basically touch base on a couple of things that are the key for the for a good outcome for our patients. So obviously, success rates are the key for all of you to have a baby quickly and not to spend too much time and money in the IVF clinic. The thing is that the key thing is that, you know, especially for our gay male couples, the actual process should be very easy. And it should be basically that there is no medical difficulty. When we work in a fertility clinic, we have many difficult cases, difficult patients over 40, where we struggle. And you might, for example, know from some of your friends when they're doing fertility treatments, they basically have multiple failed cycle, multiple failed transfers. There is a struggle of going back to the fertility clinic, and all of that causes a lot of stress to the patients who are going through those difficulties. I say when we are doing egg donation and surrogacy for our gay male patients, that should be medically a breeze. There shouldn't be anything difficult there, right? You're getting a very young fertile egg donor, ideally the younger, the better. And you're getting a surrogate, somebody who has been carried babies multiple times with great success. So from the medical standpoint, really for a fertility specialist, the whole process should be very easy and shouldn't really be a difficulty. Where I have seen the whole medical process being difficult was when the wrong people were picked to help you, right? For example, if you were picking an egg donor that is too old, or if you were picking a surrogate that has some trouble carrying, or maybe medically has some medical issues, so it's not a great candidate to become a surrogate. And so basically what I always stress out, that the key to success, to have basically a lot of good healthy embryos, is to get a young egg donor with a lot of eggs. We do screen, for example, in the United States, and every egg donor will undergo medical screening to see if that donor is a good candidate to become a donor. And what that means is that we do AMH testing, that we do an ultrasound to see how many eggs the donor has. But really one of the main things that you can see right away is the age of the donor. And the most difficult patients in the IVF clinic we have are elderly patients, women who have been waiting too long to reproduce. So you definitely want, as your egg donor, if you're having to use an egg donor, to pick someone who is young. And in the US, we have donors as young as 20, 21 years old. And the younger the donor, generally you get more eggs and you get better quality eggs, and that results in a better embryo. I assume that the clinic that you will go to is keeping up the standard. So the actual success rate, of course, depends on the clinic, on how good care is given to the eggs and embryos in the whole medical process. But in your situation, we assume you will go to a good clinic that has a high standard, and the success will really depend on the quality and the age of the eggs. Especially if you're thinking about splitting a donor, which a lot of our male patients do, they basically, we are looking for very strong donors. So even among younger women, you might have women who are, average donors that might give you like 15 to 20 eggs. You also have some donors that are stronger that might give you like 30 eggs. And that is something that we are looking for example, if we have male couples splitting the eggs. So once we develop healthy embryos, we want to have a good number of healthy embryos. So that's the key, to not be worried that you only have 1 or 2 euploid, meaning chromosomally normal embryos for transfer, but that you have basically several good embryos. So even if there is a problem with the transfer, both parents, both biologic fathers will have a chance to become fathers. So the thing with a surrogate, at the other hand, is the same thing. The actual success depends what is your surrogate pick. So we generally, in the United States, we would never, and I think most of the other places I know, the surrogate mother has to have a history of a normal, healthy pregnancy in the past. So something that, is a prerequisite to even become a surrogate or even apply as a surrogate. But then what we do in the United States, we do a very thorough background check of the previous pregnancy. So we get all the records from the previous hospitals, we review all those, and we basically need to make sure that there was no problems in these previous pregnancies with the surrogate mother. And that ensures that the parent will have a similar pregnancy. It doesn't guarantee it, because every pregnancy is, of course, a separate event, but that minimizes the chances of any problems coming up. So when we choose a surrogate, we, for example, choose someone who ideally had multiple healthy pregnancies, someone who has basically been proven to carry the babies to birth, to full term. There was no history of premature birth. There was no other problems. So for that reason, when we do all that, I think that the success in when you're doing egg donation and surrogacy should be given as long as you choose the right egg donor and the right surrogate. Now, sometimes we've seen people pick donors that might not be that great because they really like the donor. Sometimes some of the parents even like a surrogate who might not be the perfect surrogate, but all of that might actually jeopardize the success of the outcome, which is a healthy baby, ideally after only 1 round of egg donation and 1 transfer. And I would say in the United States, most of the surrogates become pregnant during the first transfer attempt. Sometimes, we have success rates of 70 to 80% per transfer. And if they do not become pregnant, then usually they become pregnant during the second attempt. So that is basically what I want to point out to all of you, that picking the right donor and picking the right surrogate is 75% of your success. 25% of your success is obviously having the right clinic that will ensure that everything comes back together the best way possible. So I wanted to, at this point, also ask if there are any questions from the audience or any questions from Sam.
Yes, look, I've got a question that comes up. Sorry, I stopped my video. For many parents, if someone wants to bring their own egg donor with them to the States, and they're within the criteria you point out in terms of they're under 30, but perhaps they haven't had children already, is that possible?
Yeah, so if we, bringing your own egg donor is definitely something that is possible, that some patients do and they want to do that. I've sometimes, however, seen they want to bring in an egg donor that is almost 40 years old, where the IVF, again, becomes a struggle. So if you have a known egg donor, yes, we're welcome to take an egg donor, but that basically means that you would have to have somebody between the age 20 to 30 that should be your egg donor, ideally closer to 20. So for some reasons, when patients bring in the egg donors, a lot of times they're trying to bring in somebody who otherwise would be actually a poor candidate to be a donor. And we had to talk some patients out and say, well, you can try, but what will happen is you will spend money, and the egg donor might have to travel to the US, and then at the end we might have a situation where we might not have a healthy embryo to transfer back, or maybe we only have 1 embryo, and then the next step is becomes a big concern, because the thing is that the more embryos we have for transfer, the less likely it is that there will be some sort of problem in that whole process.
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure if you're going to talk about this a bit later, but what about the issue of pre-genetic testing of embryos?
Well, pre-genetic testing, yeah. So this is, I almost don't mention it as something special, because it is a standard thing in the United States to do pre-implantation genetic screening of the embryo. So to basically pre-screen the embryo, ensure that the embryo is chromosomally normal before the embryo transfer. So the thing is that, especially in surrogacy, we would always do the pre-implantation screening. The only exceptions would be, for example, if the parent has last two embryos frozen, they don't have any more material frozen, and they may only have two embryos that are left over. There is no point, I think, freezing, testing, and refreezing these embryos. So those are the embryos that we would transfer right away without testing, to give it kind of a last chance in the surrogate. And also at this point, I want to point out that the success rate, if we have a situation like that, when we have only one embryo that is left, we would recommend using a repeat surrogate. People always are put, in front of a question like, should we use a first-time surrogate? Should we use a repeat surrogate? And we say that the repeat surrogate is generally the best if you have a limited amount of embryos to transfer, because you don't want you the first one to find out that there is some problems with the embryo transfer with a surrogate. I mean, rarely there is someone who can get pregnant naturally but has difficulty in IVF, and you don't want to be the parent who's finding this out with your last embryo. So, for example, if you have a lot of embryos, you're perfectly fine with a well-screened first-time surrogate. But if you only have one or two embryos, we always recommend to take a repeat surrogate who has gone through the process, ideally more than once, and that we know that she can get pregnant easily with the embryo transfers.
Okay. There's questions also come up about egg donors. We have a lot of our intending parents who are different ethnic backgrounds. What's the availability like of different ethnicities for donors in the US? Is it possible?
Well, I mean, as you know, we have the US, you have immigrants from all over the world in the United States. So generally, we're able to find every match. I mean, I have a donor from Mongolia. I had a donor from Argentina. We have basically like donors coming from different ethnic backgrounds. And it might require some more search, because different parts of the United States basically have different types of donors. But it's also very common to travel, and we actually had donors travel from different countries to donate to the United States. So that's another option too, that the donor doesn't even need to come from the United States. They can come from outside of the US.
Okay. A final question I've got before I interrupt is this issue of genetic carrier screening. Do you recommend that carrier screening be done on the egg donor and the sperm provider?
We absolutely do that. I mean, we don't want somebody to go through this whole process and then match up in a bad way with the donor. In the US, every year the panel for gene testing is getting larger and larger. So currently we test for 502 diseases. That's our standard panel. So, and I don't want to scare the parents. I mean, if anybody comes back positive, I mean, the more you test, especially among European patients, we find a lot of gene issues, carrier statuses. I mean, that's the whole point, that we're basically picking up things that the parents would never think about, ever carrying. As long as the donor doesn't have the same thing, it's all fine. I mean, we have, with the larger panels, when we screen for a lot of things, we find more things. So it's common to find 2 or 3 gene disorders in somebody with a European background, but we just need to ensure that the donor is negative for that. So as long as the donor is negative for that, it should not be a problem.
Right. Thank you.
Perfect. Do we have any questions or?
No one else has got any there. one more coming here. If a person has a donor who's in another state in the USA, you're in California, how does that work with getting the donor?
Oh, that's not an issue. I mean, we actually have donors from all over the US, so that should not be, I mean, within the United States, it's not a problem at all. The thing is, of course, that there might be some travel costs, so if the donor has to travel from across the states, if a donor is coming from Georgia, and they have to fly over to California, there will be probably like a flight that parents have to pay. There will be some hotel costs. So that is the only thing that, generally it's not a problem at all. It might be a little bit more travel expense for the parents that they have to cover, but we have donors coming basically from all over the US. We of course prefer if the donor is somewhere closer, makes the things more simpler, but we have donors coming from the US and from outside of the US, so that's not a problem. And they usually get monitored, so they get 1 or 2 visits at an ultrasound clinic closer to their home, and then they come over for the egg retrieval over to Los Angeles.
Okay, great. One more question's come in. Do you genetically screen surrogates?
There is no reason to do it unless we believe, for example, there is some, genetic issue where they have, pregnancy loss. But we would never take somebody where we actually even would think about having some recurrent losses shouldn't be a surrogate mother. So there is no need for the screening, for the gene screening for the surrogate, because none of these genes are going to be passed over to the baby.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, okay. That's great. I assume some of our intending parents, with the heterosexual couples, they have embryos already made, and they'd like to try with those before they go to a donor. So that would be, could you do that? Could you use their embryos first?
Yeah. What we do is we just basically recommend that then by the time they're basically transferring their embryos to the surrogate, they're working on creating some donor embryos as well, because they don't want to keep the surrogate too long under contract. Some parents are, okay, let's try with our own embryos and then we're going to find the donor. Well, then they realize there's so much choice in the US, and you have so many donors, so many pictures, so many profiles, that then they have trouble deciding on a donor. And then if they're using a fresh donor, which we generally recommend still a fresh donor whenever that's possible, then we need to make sure that the donor can donate. There's some issues to organize all of it. So we recommend if them at the time when they're getting ready to transfer their own embryos to kind of pick up a backup donor, so they have the things aligned, what to do if it doesn't work with their own embryos. And as you're all the people watching probably know, it is very, it's not difficult to transfer the tissue, to bring the tissue to the US, to do any extra testing. The only thing we would need to do is FDA testing in the parents, basically in the sperm source and the egg source, before we would transfer it to a surrogate in the US. So anyone who wants to transfer the tissues, we had patients transferred from Germany, UK, from different countries, we can do it and we can transfer it into the surrogates in the US.
Okay. Someone's asked a question. Is there an age limit for using your own eggs?
For using your own eggs, well, if we are trying, we had patients try. The oldest patient that got pregnant in our clinic, that's only one patient in the 15 years, was 47 years old. The oldest person I know that got pregnant for IVF generally is 48 years old. So in general, we are, after 45, it generally doesn't work with their own eggs. So we do recommend anyone over 45 to use donor eggs. If somebody wants to try, we're also not making it difficult. We're not going to say, oh, we're not going to try at 46 or 47, but we have to, honestly say to the patient that it most likely won't work. It would be just some sort of psychological benefit for someone to maybe see that things are not working. But generally, we recommend anyone over 45 should use a donor.
Yeah, okay. That's great. I think that's all the questions that have come in. That's really good. One more thing's come up. on here, people are saying, if you've got a surrogate recruited, what medical screening do you have to do for the surrogate?
Well, the medical screening for the surrogate is there is initial screening, before the surrogate even comes to the fertility clinic. But once once she passes like a basic initial screening, we would go through the medical records. She would come in, would do blood work. We would check her, of course, for all infectious disease, make sure she doesn't smoke, she doesn't take any substances, she's vaccinated. All the liver function, renal function is normal. So there is a bunch of blood work that we would get on a surrogate. And then, the main thing is, of course, that she has a healthy uterus. So we would do ultrasound off the uterus. We do a saline ultrasound, sometimes even a hysteroscopy where we put a camera in the uterus to make sure it's all fine. But obviously, the uterus is the most important organ in the surrogate to be healthy, and then of course her overall health, making sure that she has normal weight, that there are no other medical issues. And we also had some parents bring in their own surrogate. That's also possible. I mean, I even had a case where the daughter didn't have a uterus and she used her mom as a surrogate. That's also possible. But it just you want to get the best possible surrogate that you can. For this whole process, because it's definitely worth waiting and finding the best possible surrogate.
Yeah, okay, that's really helpful. I mean, I do see people sort of come to me and they say, "Oh, look, what if the surrogate's uterine lining is not thick enough? Are you going to cancel the cycle then, and do it later? What happens if?"
Well, I mean, when the lining is not thick enough, the lining is another thing. Is we generally, when we screen the surrogate, we see the surrogate mid-cycle. So we make sure that most the surrogate should have a normally developing lining. We have some patients where there is for example, the surrogate had an IUD, had a marine IUD for many years. And in those patients, sometimes the linings do not build up very thick, but they're still receptive. So we would see also how many embryos we have left, and then we would discuss it with the parents that even if sometimes the lining doesn't meet a certain thickness, it still doesn't mean that she cannot get pregnant, but then her pregnancy chances might be reduced. And then we would discuss with the parents, would they still want to proceed with that embryo transfer or not?
Yeah, okay. Can your IVF clinic also help recruit surrogates sometimes?
If we can, we can help recruit some surrogates in Los Angeles as well. We would either do it through our agency that is associated with our clinic, or we would just refer them to another agency where they can find a surrogate. It depends what kind of wishes they have, what kind of surrogate they're looking for. What is the price range of the surrogate? We can help them basically once we know what they're looking for.
Yep. Okay, that's great. Look, thank you so much for coming in, Dr. Vigil.
You're very welcome. Yeah, thank you guys.
That's great.
Thank you.
I know we'll be hearing from one of
your invite
later on. That's great, because I think Christian's coming on later in the parent panel.
Perfect.
Yep. All right. That's great. Thank you, Sahib.
Sure. Yes. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Okay. So I'm just going to hide that screen now. We were going to have Victoria Ferrara come in from Worldwide Surrogacy, but she hasn't joined us yet. So I'm just going to run us through some material that came up in the conference yesterday about choosing an agency. So let me just run through that with you now. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Let's have a look here. So this is one of the important considerations when you're going, whether it's an egg donor agency or a surrogacy agency. We want you to understand a number of things that you should be asking them about before you go ahead. For first of all, how long have they been around for? Agencies sometimes come up, surrogates might start their own agency, there might be a one-man band and have done this for very little time and not have a lot of backup. How many staff do they have? What's their staff turnover? What's the current caseload? We do find agencies with a huge caseload, which might be managing 100 cases at a time, are going to give you very low levels of service. So understand that. Understand their agreed response times. What services are outsourced and who they're outsourced to is really important. And trying to think. Also, how do they screen their surrogates? where do they come from, and where will their surrogates live during the process? How long, will they take to match for you? And can recent past parents vouch for the surrogate also? So they're the kind of things you should be asking. Also, understand the difference between known identity release and anonymous donor. So a known donor is a friend or family member who agrees to be a donor for you. An ID release donor is someone who's agreed to share their contact details with your child when the kid's at 16 or 18, in case your child wants to know and meet them and write them a letter. Anonymous donor, no details. But in this day and age, given the fact that you can do genetic DNA matching online, we can't ever guarantee that a donor is going to be truly anonymous. Make sure you talk to your kids about, talk to your partner if you have one, and your trusted family members about your attitudes to medical disability and termination, and be prepared to disclose to your kids how they were created. With your surrogate, make sure you meet her up front, insist on knowing lots of details about her contact details, and her motivations. Compare costs between providers. It's good to do that because they do differ a lot. And make sure you know how transparent they are about costs by asking them sort of hard questions on that line. And we've got questions we can supply you with in that area. Beware providers who encourage 2 embryo transfers at a time, because twin pregnancies tend to be very high risk and come with lots of insurance issues. But understand also what the track record is of a provider and what their current caseload is. Those kind of things are really important to understand. And then so lastly, you will find this area a bit overwhelming. We do offer some support for intending parents, whether that's just at the start of the process in helping them choose providers to work with, introducing them to lawyers and agencies and migration agents and other parents. We can help with paperwork and advocating on your behalf, particularly if you're not getting the responses you're looking for. But you've got to remember, in this area, it does require patience and it does require a lot of trust in the providers you're working with, particularly in the cross-border setting. You're going to have to choose providers who you feel you can trust. That's really important. Lastly, some of our support involves customized advice, and it could be, a 1-hour consultation, some follow-up support as well, really designed to provide specific guidance for you and your circumstances to suit your budget and your relationship status and your risk profile, and really whether or not you've got embryos already made or not. So that kind of thing can be really important. So I hope that's a bit of useful background. Cindy, are you online there now?
I'm here, yeah.
Yeah.
Want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think we might, because Victoria's not here yet. I think we might start with you.
Okay.
Talking about the Canadian thing before we go onto the parent panel.
Okay.
So I'm just going to bring you up on.
I'm with Leah as well.
Oh, perfect. That's great.
Do you want Leah to go first?
Oh, whatever you like. Yep, that's fine.
No, it's me too. Okay.
So just by way of introduction, for those of you who don't know, Cindy Wasser is one of Canada's leading surrogacy lawyers, has worked in this area for many, many years, is a parent via surrogacy herself. So she knows the emotional issues that are involved in this. Leah Swanberg is the owner of Canadian Fertility Consulting, Canada's biggest surrogacy agency. That's been working in this field a long, long time and has worked with hundreds and hundreds of foreign intending parents over many years to help them reach their dreams. She's an amazing lady in terms of knowing how to support surrogates, and that's what we're looking for in these agencies. So we're really excited to have them here. Cindy, first of all, is going to take us through some of the legal considerations for you when you're engaging in Canada. Hi, Cindy.
Hello, thank you again, Sam. It's been a pleasure to spend the weekend with you and the team at Growing Families. So we're in our room in Dublin, and we had a great day yesterday, and now we're looking forward to speaking to our UK potential clients as well. I had the benefit of listening to the great Natalie Gamble, and I'm so grateful that she explained the needs of the UK authorities. because what I can say very briefly is we can absolutely provide everything in Canada for UK families to take their baby back home safely. Canada is an altruistic program, which means that our donors and surrogates cannot be compensated or gifted in any way. So they don't get payment for time, pain, and suffering, for example. But they may receive reimbursement funds. So any expense that a donor or surrogate incurs in relation to her journey is a legal expense that the IPs reimburse for. The law requires that the donor or surrogate submit a receipt, but where there is no receipt for some expenses, then she also swears a declaration saying this was a true expense and no one else has reimbursed me. If you're working with an agency, they collect those documents and they reimburse the donor and the surrogate from the funds that they've already collected with you. And I'm sure Leah will talk a bit about that. And so will Vicky, because it's similar in the US with agencies. So that's perfectly fine. Should anybody be doing it independently, which I really never recommend for international people in another country, you would be responsible for collecting the receipts and paying. And the person who reimburses must keep those receipts for 6 years. Now, the big question is, does our law apply to you in the UK or any other country? And in my opinion, the answer is no. But you're asking lawyers in our country to draft contracts. So we're not going to draft a contract that says you're compensating. So it's going to be a question about ensuring that it's only reimbursements during the Canadian journey. And then, as Natalie mentioned, when you apply for the parental order in the UK, you're going to have to satisfy the court that it was either altruistic or, in the case of a commercial surrogacy in the UK, in the US, that it wasn't overly done. So we do provide through the agencies a spreadsheet of expenses, and we've never had a problem with any of the UK lawyers telling us that the paperwork provided for the surrogates' expenses were a problem for the court there. The process that Natalie described for the declaration of parentage or parental order in the UK is one that is similar to Canada. After all, we were part of the Commonwealth and we adopted a number of legal procedures. So traditionally, the way you become a parent in Canada, in any province, is through that court order. But it's far less formal here, or in Canada, I should say, in that it is very rare, first of all, that anybody actually appears in the courtroom anymore. And in most provinces, we're actually dropping off the documents at the court office and picking them up once the judge signs them. So it's done very quickly. That was the state of the law when I had my own child, the first one, 14 years ago. And quite frankly, I was not content with that process. So I began a history of becoming, first of all, a fertility lawyer and lobbying our government to change that. In my view, and I would like to see this happen in the UK and every other country, the children should not be treated differently as a result of their birth via surrogacy than any other child. It is an unjustifiable constitutional issue, in my opinion, and one that I'd love to see the advocates fight harder for. I say that from a place of privilege in Canada because we already have so much great law and I'm never content. So I understand how it's harder in other places. I've spoken to the Law Reform Commission that Natalie referenced. I'm the only Canadian they actually spoke to, and I am continuing to work and to help fight the good fight so that in the future there isn't a distinction. So back to Canada, Ontario and British Columbia have an administrative process that I helped bring about in Ontario that actually states in the law, in the statute, that if you had a contract with a surrogate and she had independent counsel, meaning a lawyer different from yours, two lawyers, a contract says you are the parents at birth, and that was the intention, and the contract is signed prior to the transfer, which is when we say conception occurs via IVF, then our law in Ontario says you are the legal parents at that time. So it's almost automatic if you've got the right contract, and you will be the parents at the moment of birth. So once you're established as parents via an administrative order or a court order in those provinces where there's no choice, you can then ask for the birth certificate. And depending again on the province, that might take a few days or a week or two. In Ontario, when I act for clients going through the parental order, I usually have the birth certificate by 2 weeks. You can get your Canadian passport within a few hours if you're flying that day. It's processed based on urgency. So we fill out all the paperwork for the passport. You go to the passport office. Lately, they're not even asking you to bring the baby because of COVID concerns. But if that is reinstated, then you bring the baby and you show them your return ticket home. And then they will process the passport based on that flight. So if you're flying tomorrow, they say come back tomorrow. If you're flying in a week or two, they'll say come back in several days. Very quick. Your baby is going home as a Canadian citizen visiting the UK. So as Natalie referenced, you'll have to begin that process. Our firm has also provided letters explaining the process and advising counsel in the UK that the client is flying home, and we ask for them to provide a letter from the UK side, as Natalie mentioned. But it's been about 7 years since I've had a client tell me they were even questioned anymore at the border. And again, it was always new customs officials at the airport in the UK. So it's a very quick process, very seamless in Canada. Because the UK, as Natalie mentioned, does not recognize our parental order or a birth certificate, if you're in a province like Ontario and BC with your surrogate, then you might as well save a lot of money and do the administrative order. So you'll want to mention to your agency that that would be optimal for you for choosing a surrogate in one of those provinces, because it's about half the cost of a parental order. You should budget in total for your legals in Canada about $10,000 to $15,000, depending on what that parental order looks like, and a budget of about $6,000 for a court order. This is Canadian versus $3,000 for the administrative. So that's a big difference. So you need the contract in order to get that. And then you have a Canadian citizen automatically with a Canadian passport that you apply for, and then you can go home. Some good information to know about is that all Canadian citizens are always welcome back home. And if they are living in Canada at the age of 18, they may also sponsor their foreign parents to become Canadians. So you have the ability to become Canadian and spend your old age retiring in the Rocky Mountains, which sounds really great. And that time will come very quickly. So you send your child back to Canada to go to school, to university, or to work, and then they can apply for your citizenship as well. That's a big perk. A big difference between us and the US is that even though the child is Canadian, unlike the US taxation laws, they do not have to file tax issues with the Canadian government. We do not have that kind of provision, whereas the US citizen will have to file with the IRS there, and cannot remove their citizenship, or you can't remove the US citizenship from your child under 18. And if they do it right after they turn 18, there is a presumption they're doing it to avoid American taxation. So that's a big issue, and we do not have that issue in Canada. And that is very important to a number of my clients who do have some money issues that they would like not to share with our government.
I think
yeah.
we might have, yeah, we're going to stop there. What we'll do, we'll now do the parent panel, talking to some Canadian intending parent, and we'll come back and hear from Leah then straight after that.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much, Cindy. Terrific. Yes, down the line for questions as they come in. That's wonderful.
Okay.
All right, great. Okay, guys, so we're now going to go to our parent panel, and I'm going to welcome some very new dads here, Eric and his partner on the line. I think who are still in the States. Hi, guys. Nice to see you.
Hello. Good morning. How are you?
Great. So thanks so much for joining us. We're going to also get in Christian. Whoops. And as well, let me just get a few more people in. Okay.
Hi, Sam. Can you hear me?
Yep, that's great. I can hear you fine. We're just going to get your video on. That's all. Okay, so what we've got on the line here is we've got Eric. What's your partner's name?
Milen.
Milen. Okay, hi guys. So, and where are you from? Are you from
New York?
From New York. Okay, great. So obviously, and how old's your little one now?
Well, there are two of them. So one is 5 months and one is 4 months.
Oh my God. So you did what we call some simultaneous journeys with two surrogates.
Yes.
Okay, great. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Okay. Christian is from Germany, and he's also a gay dad via the USA. And Josh is a UK citizen. He and his partner are doing surrogacy now in Canada. I'm just going to just out of context, I should warn you that I'm also a gay dad via surrogacy. Our girls are now 11 years old, and lots of fun. So we've got a whole range of experiences here in terms of people who are at the midway through the process and just finished. And Christian, how old is your little one now?
2.5 years old now.
2.5. Okay, great. So look, I might start with you, Josh. When did you and your partner decide to talk about having kids? Was it something you always wanted to do, or was it?
Yeah, so I think we've been together now for 12 years, and I think, you know, even at the very early stages, we said, you know, we wanted to become parents. So it was always kind of the idea, and then it was always like, well, we'll get married, and then that was a couple of years, and then, oh well, we better do something. So yeah, it's taken a long time for us to get there, but it's something we've always thought that we would do.
Yeah, right. And when did you start? Well, sorry, what research did you do in terms of how you go about it?
So we had a friend who'd gone through the process in Canada. Originally, we kind of thought the only option was in the States, but we had a friend who went through Canada. He kind of told us his experiences and how he really liked the jurisdiction and the people he dealt with. So we spoke with him, and then I think we spoke with Cindy, was the first person we spoke to back in February 2020.
Yep.
Yeah, and we've been on the long journey ever since.
Yeah. Wow. All right. We'll come back to you in a minute. Christian, what about you guys? I mean, when did you start thinking about being parents?
I was thinking about at the beginning was 2018 or something. So we went through like some research how it possible. Well, our first question was how it's possible to get a legal child. So we have like the whole rights on our own child with no problems around us, and this was our big concern. And we did it in 2018, I think, and research Google. Also, we just saw also at the news some other gay parents, they went through already this. We was just really impressed. We want to have the same.
Okay, that's great. Eric, what about you guys? How long have you been talking about being dads for?
Probably about 2 years.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, we had the conversation and just kind of started the research process. And
yeah, and was one of you driving it more than the other one? Was one of you keener?
Would you like to take that?
No, I don't think so. He literally woke up one morning and said it would be great if we had children.
Yeah.
We think we can give them a good opportunity, and we're not getting any younger, so why procrastinate?
Yeah. So how old were you when you started the process?
I was 49.
Yeah.
And Milen is
44.
44. Okay. Yeah. No, you got to do it now. I think. All right. And then how long? Well, let me think for a second. Okay. Let's now turn to the egg donor part. How did you go about the egg donor sort of bit of things. So deciding on a donor, did you go to an IVF clinic or an egg donor agency?
We went through an agency.
Yep.
And so we had to go through the process twice. The first egg donor we had was in her late 20s. And once we went through the process and she produced eggs, we produced 12, but after the attrition process, we had one boy, one girl. Now, were they the most viable eggs? Not necessarily sure, but they were the only 2 eggs we had at the time. So we went through the process and the process didn't take for either surrogate.
Oh, right. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So then the next time we tried again, a second time, we chose a completely different surrogate. She was 23. Donor, and she produced 36 eggs, and out of the 36 we got 7.
Wow, so that's a big difference.
Yeah,
very different. Yeah,
hugely different. And I think all of them are girls except one egg.
Right.
So yeah, that was our
And did you guys decide you wanted to split the eggs and have some for each of you in terms of sperm provision?
yeah, we did half and half.
Yeah,
we did half and half.
Okay.
And the first time we ended up with 1 viable embryo each, and the second time they were a little bit more skewed towards Eric. And of those, well, just the successful ones, the success rate at the end. And at the end, we took the best ones, and we went almost simultaneously with 2 different surrogates.
Yeah.
Because we'd already lost a year, and a big part of our decision making was, again, I think the once you make that decision, the sooner the better.
That's what we found, because I was an older dad too. I think I was 44 when I became a dad. Bill did the same thing. We used 2 surrogates at the same time. Okay, interesting. How did you decide on which agency to use, and which IVF clinic to use?
So I think initially when you're doing the process, you're looking for ideally what is cost effective, because as the process continues, it can grow exponentially in terms of cost. So we started with a agency that says we can do it in a very cost effective sort of way, but they also take a very long time in finding surrogates. So I think part of our challenge was we were getting slightly sort of impatient. So after about the 7th or 8th month mark, we were like, okay, let's start looking for another agency. Obviously, you invest a certain amount of money in one agency, so you don't want to lose that. So you start looking for something else. And sort of what weirdly happened was the second agency we looked at found a surrogate in 2 weeks when we were with them.
Wow.
At the same time that the other agency, after being with them for 8 months, finds another surrogate. Okay. So that's how we ended up with a simultaneous journey. It wasn't our intention initially, but that's how it ended up.
Okay, and one with each agency? Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, and what about the IVF clinic? Did you have, where was your IVF clinic?
It was in California, in San Diego.
Okay. San Diego Fertility Center.
Great. Okay. All right, we'll come back to your story in a minute. Josh, let's go back to you for a second. How did you decide you wanted to do surrogacy in Canada?
So it was speaking with a friend of ours. We assumed the USA was kind of the only option. A friend of ours who had surrogacy through Canada spoke with him, kind of gave us all the information. So that's how we kind of settled on, we think this probably works best for us. Okay,
and then what about the donor part for you guys? How did you go about finding a donor?
So the donor, we went through a couple of agencies. We were really unfortunate with our timing in terms of the pandemic. So I think in the end, we went through something like 5 different egg donors.
Because they weren't available or?
That there were either issues in going for travel. There were issues, some people postponed, and then when we went back to say, okay, things have gotten a little bit better, are you okay, they were no longer available, and just a whole range of issues there. So we were kind of really caught up in that.
Oh God. So when you finally did get a donor, I mean, were you looking for particular things in a donor, or were you at the end saying, oh look, we're just getting desperate now?
Well, I think at the beginning, we were like, yes, we want this. And then I really don't think that we kind of strayed away from that. It was really important for us, that we had a good healthy background, that there was some education and, you know, something that we could connect with the donors. So I don't think that we really kind of shied away from what we were looking for at the beginning.
Yeah, okay. So once you found the donor, how many embryos did you guys make?
So I think at the beginning we were able to get something like 39 eggs, and then that came, as you kind of whittle it away, we got down to 9.
Okay, and was that with Create in Canada?
Yeah, that's our IVF clinic in Canada. And can I say, whilst we went through all of the processes with the different egg donors and surrogates and everything, I mean, they have been absolutely fantastic. The nurse that we deal with there, you couldn't ask for anything more. It goes far beyond what the kind of service and support I would expect from an IVF clinic. So I'd highly recommend working with IVF, working with creative people.
Yeah, I met one of the nurses yesterday actually at the conference, and she was great.
Yeah.
Okay. And look, as I'm going to ask the question of Eric too in a minute, but how many embryo transfers have you gone through so far?
So we did a embryo transfer with our first surrogate in August last year. That didn't work. We then got matched with another surrogate at the beginning of this year. She had family circumstances, so we then needed to get rematched. We got rematched in June, did a transfer in July. And unfortunately it took, but then we had a miscarriage at about the 8-week mark. So
which unfortunately, as many people on the call won't realize, is actually really common to have a miscarriage in the first 12 weeks of a pregnancy.
Yeah.
And I get, you know, we went through the same thing ourselves, but tough. What keeps you going? I mean, you guys have been on, you know, a long road already. I mean, are there times when you think, is it ever going to work?
No. I think we're fairly confident. I think that's because, you know, we've got great people around us. Like our lawyer Cindy has been fantastic. Our agency CFC has been incredibly supportive to us, but also to our surrogate, which I think is even more. You know, when she went to when our most recent surrogate went and got the information that there was been a miscarriage. I mean, that was incredibly tough on her, particularly she was in it by herself. We were on the other side of the Atlantic. And so the support that they've been able to wrap around her was really important for us to know that, you know, we were kind of, you know, we felt incredibly responsible for her as well. So I think the fact we've got agencies, lawyers, and an IVF clinic that have been really helpful, supportive, whilst it hasn't been an easy journey whatsoever. Having those people around us has kind of kept us going. No, we just got to keep on going. Good point.
Christian, for you, are you engaged also in California? Did you? Is that right?
Yes, I did everything in California. Yes.
Okay, and was the IVF clinic also do the surrogacy part? Yeah, Tree of Life.
Yes. This is, I did everything with Tree of Life Center, and Tree of Life Center, they got a solution. They have like an in-house agency that was taking care of everything. So everything was like in the under the tree of Life, everything. We just found a fresh egg donation. We just find a surrogate, and we just when everything was working by Tree of Life, also the medical part and also like the agency part. This was just really great because everything was just really close and everything was just working hand to hand.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. What about who provides the sperm? I mean, did you argue about who would be the sperm donor?
No, this was right away. It was clear between us, me and my husband Stefan, because he was the one. He chose the egg donor. He was always had the wish to have like an Asian egg donor. So this was clear, and I did the sperm donation.
Okay, great. That's really nice. Josh, what about you guys? Did you split the eggs amongst both of you sperm-wise, or did you?
Yeah, we did. We ended up, I think, 5 with one and 4 with the other.
Okay, great. And then how did you decide who would do the first transfer? Was that a toss of a coin, or?
No. So I think for my husband Dean, it was the kind of genealogy was important for him. Yeah.
Yeah. Coming back to you, Christian, I am seeing an increasing trend in IVF clinics having their own surrogacy agency in-house. That was quite convenient, was it?
Yes, this was really, really nice. So we had just everything, and there was no other a lot of space between them, and this was just really great. So we found a really great solution about this.
Yeah. How many embryo transfers did it take to have success?
Wait a second. No, we had like the first embryo transfer didn't work, and then we was Dr. Vuk Jovanovic was recommended us to do 2 embryos to the same time.
Yes.
And there we was lucky, so we was successful with 1 embryo, and so we get our child and also our little daughter. Like we was wishing all the time to wish like a daughter, and then the first transfer didn't work, and the second we chose a boy and a girl, and it came out a girl. So we was like, this is what we just wanted to have from the beginning on.
Yeah, great. Eric, what about you guys? Did you both do a transfer to each of your surrogates at the same time? Is that right?
Yes.
Right. And did they both take?
The first time they did not.
No.
Okay.
And the first time they both didn't take, and the second time they both took.
Yeah.
Wow.
The first time they were from the first egg donor. The second time was the second egg donor.
Right. Okay, but you didn't switch surrogates, because I think Josh switched surrogates, but you kept with the same surrogates.
Yeah, we kept the same surrogates, and we also did not switch the surrogates between us. We just kept everything the same.
Yeah.
The only difference was the egg donor, and she was much younger than the first one.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we also discovered too during the first time is that there is that aspect that you want to kind of manage and control every aspect that's going on.
Yep.
And then the second time we were like, okay, let's just completely relinquish and kind of be extremely malleable in the process and see where it takes us versus trying to really dictate each step, which is,
Yeah. And what advice would you have? Because I noticed Josh has decided on that. I think just trust his professionals overseas. What advice would you guys have in terms of which process was the best for you?
I think that it's important to, I don't think you want to relinquish all control, right? You definitely want to manage what's happening with your team.
Yeah.
Right, in the process. But I do think there is an aspect where you have to be malleable within the process.
Yeah. What states did your surrogates live in?
California and Oregon.
Right. So you had to get from one state to the other within a month for the second birth.
Oh yes, indeed. And that was orchestrating. That was quite a challenge. We chose Portland as our home base, which is where Julia was born. And then once she was born, very shortly after, I flew to California. We both got there separately, but got there in time for this little one. And then we came home 2 weeks later back to Portland, stayed in Portland until June, and then flew home.
And Portland's a great place for
it. Is. Yeah, I've been there. I love it. Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
The people, the culture is just very supportive of gay parents.
Yeah. That's great. Wow. So did you do the gender thing where you just knew what gender you were having?
We knew beforehand.
Yeah. Okay.
We didn't really select it. I mean, the first time we had a boy and a girl, and the second time it was mostly girls, but we went with the highest quality eggs first, and they happened to be 2 girls. We try not to over-engineer that aspect. I mean, a lot of it is ultimately in the hands of the universe and probabilities, right? So that's the part you have to relinquish. The rest is a little bit like you're taking care of your own health, right? You need to be well informed. You need to trust your medical doctor, but you need to be well informed.
Yeah. Which were your 2 surrogacy agencies you used?
We used IARC, which is
Yes,
based in Minnesota,
Minnesota.
and Worldwide Surrogacy, which is based in Connecticut.
Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, terrific. Okay. And did you find, apart from the match times being much better with Worldwide, I think, was it?
Yeah.
Any other differences you saw between agencies in terms of how they worked?
Response time maybe, and
Yeah.
availability for one was I think IARC was maybe because it's bigger. I constantly felt the process aspect of it. Worldwide was a little bit more tailored in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, what tips would you give other intending parents about who is considering surrogacy? Or anybody, Christian?
What tips? Yes, it's all about to have like our own child. That's really difficult to get any tips. But I just chose a tree of life, and we just did just surrogacy because we was our biggest wish to have like our own child, and the only possibility is to get like our own child with our own material through a surrogacy program. And we just found that California is just the most working country about the laws for gay people, and so we had like the most secure feeling about California.
Yeah. Were you worried because you were so far away from the process? You were in Germany and the surrogate was in America?
No, we was not worried because Pacific Surrogacy and Ectonation, like this in-house agency, they was really good connected to our surrogate, and so we was really good informed about everything. And also we had like always Zoom meetings. We had also always like WhatsApp videos about everything. We was just well informed about everything, and this was just really close.
Yeah, great. Eric, how did you guys keep in touch with your surrogates during the journey? Was it sort of Zoom meetings, or what did you do?
We did phone calls, text messages. We flew out to see them more than once.
Yeah.
So we saw them regularly, and we still speak to them probably on a weekly basis.
Yeah. And had either of them been a surrogate before? Was this the first time?
Both of it was the first time for them.
As
Right.
surrogates,
As
but
surrogates. But they have their own children.
They have their own children. One has 3 girls, the other one has 2, and they really, I mean, when they say it takes a village to raise a child, I honestly truly believe that to be the case. You just need the network of support. And when you asked what aspects can you control, actually one of the aspects you can control, and I would suggest folks work on, is create that network of support.
Yeah.
The agencies, the surrogate's spouse or partner, if there is one, the children, if they have children. I mean, your own family and friends, all of that matters. One of our best support network was actually friends of ours, a straight couple that was going through IVF themselves because they had some reproduction challenges, and they'd gone through a couple of transfers, and we were literally in the same process together.
Yeah.
So just having the right folks around you and the right energy is hugely important.
Yeah.
And the rest is frankly a bit like playing darts. Some things happen when you want them to, and some things will surprise you when they happen, and it will be wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Christian, for you, were you there at the birth?
Yes. We was in the birth, like because of Corona, this was just really to be there, and but everything was just great.
Right. Was it? Did you panic a bit being new parents, not having? Did you do a class beforehand to know how to take care of a baby?
Yes, we had a plan. Like you're talking about who is taking care of the baby when they're gonna work back, or what do you?
I'm talking about. Were you worried about how you would look after the baby as first-time dads?
No. we just was really lucky that we just saw our child like in the just like few minutes after this what we just was born. Stefan, he was actually with the surrogate like in the room where the baby was delivered, and the baby just came to us. We just we just grabbed it and we just fell in love for like the first seconds. We was not afraid about everything, and we had just really great nurses that were took care about us, and this was just really great. Yes, was just really great.
We have got another German intending parent on the webinar who's asked Christian, how hard was the process of bringing your daughter back to Germany and be acknowledged as a parent under German law? Was that very difficult?
No, this was not really difficult. I was just surprised that like the German embassy in Los Angeles, they was actually working for us. They was really nice, and they gave us a lot of information what we just need to have. And one biggest thing is to have like the pre-birth order, but this is also going to be automatically in the Californian process when they go through, and with the pre-birth order, and then you get the birth certificate, of course, and then you are the parents, they are written in the birth certificate, and with pre-birth order you just go to the embassy and you're getting right away your German passport, like the German Reisepass, and this is just like the important thing. And then back in Germany you just go through the paperwork, but this was not difficult. This was not difficult.
That's great to know. Eric, for you guys, when the babies were born, did you worry about how you'd look after them? You know, how the change nappies and feed bottles and things?
Oh no, so
Oh, you didn't?
No, I didn't worry about it at all. I think, well, for me, because I'm that kind of person that's like a bit of a planner in that way.
Yeah.
Lynn is much more like okay, I've got an hour to get there, I'll be fine. I'm not like that. I have to kind of, so, you know, it was an Amazon frenzy of like ordering Dr. Brown's, about going through the process of finding doulas and nannies so that we had some sort of system in place, because I was taking time off, Lynn was still working, but we needed to have that source where we could actually sleep. And a piece of advice I would absolutely recommend is absolutely in the first couple of months, having a doula be able to manage and help to put the girls on a schedule or your child on a schedule. And in Portland, as I said, we loved it because that whole town is geared toward this process. Yeah. Whether you're straight, gay, or otherwise, you know. But having if you can, having those systems in place are extremely helpful. But I raised my brother and sister, so this is seems very normal to me. Okay, great. Not unusual, yeah. So whereas Milen was like, no, I'm not sure what this is, what I'm doing. Yeah, but he's done extremely well. Yeah.
It just takes time. Yeah. I mean, it's time and depends on the country. In some places, if you cannot take time off work, you definitely need help. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, the doula is like a nanny, is that right?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. For us, our nanny works during the day, and then our doula was there to literally kind of, do the night feedings, get the girls on a sleep schedule and a feeding schedule. Because, one is plenty, two is quite a bit to manage. Right. Yeah.
Are you both working full time now? Or is one of you taking time off?
No, we're both working full time.
Well, no wonder you said need support. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Josh, what does your family think about you having kids now? Is it something that theirs were shocked by when you told them you want to have kids, or?
No, I don't think they were really shocked. I think they've gotten more interested and involved as the process goes along. So, every time that we've had a setback, they're far more involved and, asking more questions and everything. So no, they've been very supportive.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Because I think some parents, it's harder. I think, Christian, your parents were quite supportive too, weren't they, even in Germany?
Yes, they are supporting me great. But actually, I got just my mom is left, and my mom is living with us together in a house, just like in an apartment in the same house where we were just living, and she is supporting us a lot. Yes, of course, it's just really nice. Sam, I'm so sorry for that because I need to go to the airport. I need to go.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. We have to
say
finish
thank you very
now.
much for everything.
Great.
And we're gonna see us in Australia. Thank you so much.
That's
And
great.
if somebody has any questions, you can always contact Sam, and Sam knows the way to me.
Great. Thanks, Christian. That's good.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye bye.
Josh, are you actually Australian or English?
Yes, no, we're Australian living in London at the moment.
Right. Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. Look, guys, thanks. That's really good. I'm just checking there's no more questions coming from the panelists here. But no, I just might just ask one final question for Eric and Milan. What was the hardest part of the process for you guys?
For me, it was managing family.
You mean your own parents? And
Yes, the ones that still think that I'm their property.
Right. I mean, because
that was the most challenging aspect.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I get various opinions about whether or not you should invite your mum to come along to the birth as well. And some people say, yeah, it was really handy. Others say, no, it was really annoying because they try to tell them what to do the whole time.
Yeah, it's there's plenty to do, and folks, some are super supportive, others go through roller coaster emotions.
Yeah.
So for me, that was the most challenging.
I don't know. I think for me, the most challenging was, I think, because I'm the touchy-feely one. That like when we did the actual first transfer and it didn't take, that was pretty difficult to manage, I think, emotionally. Again, same way that Josh was speaking, and let the surrogates take that very hard as if it's something they did wrong, which is nothing to do. But like when you're trying to manage your emotions plus theirs, it was a difficult part during that time period. I think for myself was just everything's fine. You guys are great. It has nothing to do with you. As I said, we had 2 eggs. Were they the most viable? Who can say, really? But they were the only 2 we had. We didn't want to miss that opportunity if it was possible. Yeah. But for me, I think that was the most challenging part, was the emotional aspect of what you're managing.
Yeah, sure. It's a bit of a roller coaster, I know, in terms of, possible failures. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, guys, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for coming on. Feel free to stay on the line and watch the kids panel in 20 minutes or so. But that's great. Really, really good to sort of have you in here and talking about your journeys. Really appreciate it. It's great.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate that as well.
Thanks very much, Sam.
All right, guys. Thanks, Josh. That's great.
Good luck, everyone.
Okay, we're going to go back now to Leah Swanberg from Canadian Fertility Consulting, who's going to talk to us about the process of surrogacy in Canada, because it is a different system to the USA in that it's more altruistic in the way it's managed, more cost effective as a result. To Leah, sorry, Cindy, no, it's Leah.
No,
Cindy's team. Yes.
We're together.
Great to see you. Thank you so much. Leah has been a surrogate before. How many times now?
I've been a surrogate twice.
You have about 5 kids of your own, I think, is that right?
I have 5 kids, and I've been an egg donor 6 times also, anonymous and known.
Wow. So Leah is really the woman who knows everything about this area. As I said before, she's got a great reputation for surrogate support in the Canadian context. She knows just what surrogates need out of things, and so we're really, really excited to have her talking about the process. I'll let you take over.
Do you want me to do my slides, or I can just do
whatever
chatting?
You like.
Okay, I'll do chatting.
Yeah, you're fine.
So as Sam mentioned, my name is Leah Swanberg. I am the owner of Canadian Fertility Consulting and Egg Helpers. We help intended parents within Canada and internationally to become parents through egg donation and surrogacy, using fertility clinics in Canada or the US, depending on where they have embryos or where they've decided to engage. Over the past 17 years, we've had many clients from the UK specifically, as well as all over Europe. who have come to Canada for a couple of key reasons. One being our sort of shared values and their ability to travel freely and easily to Canada. And we've been able to develop some great relationships with lawyers and other partners in Europe. Many of our clients have had embryos frozen in Spain or in other places that they began to engage, most recently Ukraine, and have been able to ship their embryos to Canada very easily. And so for us, that's been sort of a gap in the market until now, or, you know, within other parts of the world. And so we feel really fortunate that we are able to offer that option to prospective parents who are interested in building their families without having to leave embryos behind, you know, whether that's in the UK, the Ukraine, or somewhere else abroad. We have surrogates available in our program. As the guy said, you know, their journey hasn't been easy, and the most beautiful thing about surrogacy is that it's a human process, and the most heartbreaking thing about surrogacy is that it's a human process. And so while we do our best to support everyone, there is no magic answer, unfortunately, to why journeys are not successful, or why miscarriage happens, or why egg donors are unable to move forward and, you know, another donor is having to be selected. It all can be very challenging. And so my sort of tips for intended parents living abroad are to find your key people, and first sort of within your family to find, you know, and family can mean many things. So whether it's a friend or your parents or your sister, people within your community who, you know, and I guess I'll back up and say, when choosing those people, choose the people that you would call if something were to go wrong. Who would that first phone call be to? And talk to them about your journey, because those are the people that are going to be able to show up for you. Telling the whole world some to do that. And, you know, it's exciting for me when I follow families or people who are growing their families on Instagram, and I love that. However, for many of us, you know, the difference between secrecy and privacy is huge. And so being able to create sort of a network within your network that will be your people, and then extend from there. The first suggestion always when I speak to intended parents is find a lawyer. Find a lawyer where you live, and find a lawyer where you are planning to engage, to ensure that you can actually engage there, and what timelines look like in terms of traveling across to Canada or to the US or wherever you're engaging, and how long it will take to travel home. It's so important that you have all of that information. So when looking at the cost, you are not just looking at, you know, our glossy brochure cost. You are looking at, you know, that cost. I do plus 20, you know, plus 20% on top of whatever anyone tells you is sort of the oh shit tax. You know, when things don't go well, you have budgeted, or you have sort of put aside an additional amount of money to be able to proceed. And so you've now got your people, now you've got your lawyers. Next, my suggestion is to talk to a doctor, whether it's your family doctor, if you live somewhere that is progressive enough to have a conversation about surrogacy, to ask for semen analysis, to ask for blood work, to ask for an ultrasound, to ask for the initial test to be done. For many of our clients, not having a genetic link to their child is just a non-starter. They will just choose to pursue adoption or another type of family building. And so for me, I want to know that up front. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to say surrogacy is for everyone, because I don't know what surrogacy is for you until you know what surrogacy is for you. And so having a family doctor or a fertility clinic in your community that will allow you to do these initial tests, and then engaging with the fertility clinic wherever it is that you are going to be pursuing surrogacy. And again, bring those results, bring your questions, ask about timelines, ask about nursing care. For myself, a key criteria for a clinic is, do they have a therapist on staff that anyone can talk to at any time? And the reason that's important is because things don't always go well. And I need to know that a surrogate in my program has not only access to a counselor through my program, which we do, but that also if they happen to be at the clinic and find out, tough news, hard news, whether it's that they aren't able to move forward as a surrogate, or they've suffered a miscarriage, or that the embryos that were to be transferred didn't make the thaw. I need to know that there's a mental health professional there to support and care for her in those critical moments. And so as we build our team, figuring out who you are and what you need, because you take yourself with you into this journey. We support intended parents who travel around the globe for surrogacy. And the one thing I've said is, if you are engaging in a country in which legal advice isn't needed for a surrogate, or independent legal advice isn't needed, take yourself with you and demand that it is. When you come to Canada, if genetic testing isn't always a part of the donor screening, but you've heard about it and are interested and require, then you let your clinic know that. And it is so important as you go through this journey that you have the ability to do that, that you are in control of the pieces that are you, that I don't want people to act authentically through this process. And showing up for your surrogate, showing up for your baby, and showing up for your surrogate and your baby is showing up in those difficult times, or with the questions for the doctor, or with the questions for the lawyer or the agency, and ensuring that you are making decisions that sit well with you as you go through the process. Sam, I think I'm out of time. Am I?
No, you're okay. You've got a few minutes.
Great.
Going.
Okay, excellent. I'll keep going. So as you engage in a journey, I'll speak specifically to Canada. Our surrogates are hoping for a close and committed relationship with you throughout the process. They do have independent legal advice. They obviously live in their own homes and communities across Canada. And as you go through the process, we really encourage you to leave all of the details with us or whichever agency you are working with, so that you can really fully insulate your relationship, and that your job in this is to build that intimacy with your surrogate, to build that trust and that psychological safety, so that when she has to bring up maybe a tricky question, or she finds out she's having a C-section and only one person can come in, and she's choosing her partner and she doesn't want to let you down, that she feels safe to come to you and discuss, some of these issues that may come up. And so building that relationship with her, and leaving the rest to your agency, and planning and setting up weekly calls with your surrogate. I always suggest seeing each other face to face, and taking the time out, and having that focus time on Zoom or FaceTime or WhatsApp video, so that she can really see you, and that you can really see her. And through those moments, I really think the relationship builds. And then, of course, throughout your journey, the expectation is that your agency will be supporting you, with reimbursements to your surrogate in real time, same day, that your surrogate understands her obligations throughout the process and through the pregnancy, in terms of medical testing, in terms of the legal paperwork or what may be required. We know for our UK clients that that there are specific pieces of reimbursements and expenses that we need to track a little differently, and making sure the surrogate knows that after 6 weeks she will be required to sign documentation for you. It's important that not only has her lawyer advised her of that, but that we have, so that we're managing that expectation, so that when someone calls her 6 weeks post-birth, she's not caught off guard. She understands that this was part of it throughout the whole time. And so having that, that sort of, connection, I always explain as the intent parents are the owners of the baseball team, the agency is the manager, and the surrogate is, or donor, they are the star pitcher. And why that's important is we need that star pitcher for any of our success, for your success as parents, for our success as an agency. And so really caring for her throughout the time is really the key.
So can I just check with that, Cindy, when sometimes, people match with a surrogate and it doesn't work out and you have to be rematched, does that mean that they should maybe not get too close with a surrogate until they get further down the track in case it doesn't work out?
Was that for Leah? Because you said Cindy.
Oh, you can answer it.
No, that's not really a legal question.
No.
And I'm not even sure if it's a proper agency question. I think that's human nature.
Yeah.
I believe very firmly that we can never prepare properly for doomsday. We're never going to know how we're going to react when it comes. And thinking it's coming doesn't actually make it easier to deal with when it comes.
Yeah.
So I suffered pregnancy loss too. I was too old to have my baby. I had a miscarriage. None of the fear I had getting close to a surrogate who turned out not to be good as well, who had problems. None of that made it easier for me to deal with when those things happen. So I always love to say to my clients, enjoy today.
Yeah.
Enjoy this person. Get to know your surrogate, your donor. Enjoy the pregnancy. If something happens, you'll deal with it then. So I said, get to know your surrogate. And there's, even like Josh explained so courageously, such a mensch. He's worried about her, and he didn't even speak about his own grief. They lost their baby.
Yeah.
Nothing prepares you for that. I know that loss too, and so many others.
Yeah. So, Cindy, we've heard from three gay dads and intending dads just said. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey as a mum through surrogacy? Just thinking back to when you went through it all. I mean, are there particular things that you'd give advice to the heterosexual parents on the panel that were hard for you, or
it's a great question, and it's interesting that you are asking me as a woman, as a heterosexual couple, because I always say to my clients, my grief was that my body failed me, as so many women feel. And in my case, it wasn't illness, it was age. And it took me a long time because I devoted my life to criminal justice in Canada. And then I felt that my country betrayed me because the process was so difficult. So all of that led to me becoming a fertility lawyer to fix it and to ensure that neither I or any other parent would be treated differently, and certainly not our children. But when I have worked so much now in the LGBTQ plus community, that I say, well, a struggle is a struggle. And your struggle, Sam, and the struggle of so many of my clients in that community was political. When you were, as soon as you realized what your sexual orientation was, you must have suffered so much thinking about the future, the hardship. People back, years ago would take pity, saying, how can we help you? It's going to be such a hard life. How horrendous. And then there was the politics of fighting to exist, which still occurs in so many countries. I've been blessed to live in a country where, as I said last week, we celebrated the anniversary of our former prime minister saying as Minister of Justice in 1969 that the state has no place in the bedrooms of the nation. And so the criminal code is no place for the word homosexuality. And so that was 1969, and all these other countries yelled at Canada and said, you cannot do this.
Yeah.
So I lived with that, seeing how the political struggle developed, and devoted my life to it in criminal justice and constitutional law. It's a struggle.
Yeah.
Celebrate.
how old are your kids now?
So Edda's almost 14, going on 27. So
Mm.
much fun having teenage girls, yeah.
Mm.
And Janelle just turned 11. And
Wow.
she's not quite there yet. She lives in absolute fear that she's going to become as hormonal as her older sister, and it'll be so much fun. But I wouldn't change anything for them or for my struggle, because so much came out of it. I have this incredibly blessed life where I get to help so many other people, and know that my government has listened to what I've said, has calls upon me for advice. The Irish government, the UK Law Reform Commission. I'm speaking all over the world. I'm writing a book now on fertility law, and I'm shaming Natalie. I'm going to call her to say I need your help on the British part, the UK part. So now she can't say no. So you know, I want you, Sam. So you know, it's we don't know what comes out of this grief, but it is up to us to react to it. And what I have seen in this community in the 14 years that I've done fertility law of the LGBT community is extraordinary. These conferences, the politicking, the lobbying, it's extraordinary. The strength that everybody has from their grief is inspirational. And that's what fires us. That's what keeps my passion as obviously alive as it is.
Yeah. I mean, those boys who were talking, those boys who were talking before in the panel who were from New York State. I know New York State for years didn't have any access to surrogacy, and that's changed now, hasn't it?
Imagine New York.
Yeah.
Oh my God. When I filled out Edda's birth registration documents in early 2009, she was born in December 2008. The form in Ontario said mother, father. And it had all these questions about the mother and how many weeks pregnant and how many babies we had. And that's how I developed my relationship with the registry office that now everyone benefits from. I must have called the deputy register 1,000 times a day, and I'm truly not really over exaggerating, saying, I don't understand this. I don't understand that. And my lawyer didn't fill it out. This is before I decided I've got to do this. And then I said, hey, I am heterosexual. We are a mother-father couple. But like, this is 2009. Why does it say mother, father? And where's the form for gay people? And she said, there isn't. You had to print it, cross it out, write father, and mail yours in or courier it in, whereas heterosexual couples could do it online. And so, and they wouldn't change it. And it was a shame. And that was just because nobody got around to it. And that's not an excuse anymore. Imagine saying that, not a priority today.
Yeah. Can you tell us, Cindy, you deal with so many parents from around the world. What are the main countries that you deal with who come to Canada for surrogacy? Because you deal with so many of these countries.
Oh, gosh. Well, yours, Australia is a biggie. The UK's biggie. France, Spain, Italy. I have clients from Nigeria, from Kenya, but not too many there. And I have to say, in the last decade, the US has become a big one. I mean, we were in New York right after Trump was first elected, and it felt like we had walked into a funeral. And the Canadian citizenship immigration website was crashing. And they put RCMP and border control guards all over the Quebec-New York border because people with briefcases were claiming refugee status. And we were heartbroken, but we just couldn't let them in because they were official refugees from Afghanistan at the time, Syria. So it's been like that. And now what everybody wants is a Canadian passport baby. And certainly we proved in COVID when, there were some people on the panel talking about being stuck, arriving in the US on March 13th, 2020. I remember that day clearly because I was locked up in my office with immigration, border patrol and the immigration office trying to get people from all over the world fly into the US to catch planes into Canada or to where they were landing in the US. The planes shut down. They couldn't get into Canada. We told them to take a plane from anywhere in the US to Detroit, rent a car, drive over the border, and the Canadian immigration officials were waiting for them in Windsor to say, okay, you're so-and-so coming to Canada for your baby. Miss Wasser's told us about you, come over here. We had an Australian couple, I had Israelis. They weren't even my clients. People just called me because I had done it all. Canada rose to the occasion because our ministers told the Prime Minister, and he said, well, those are Canadian babies. We don't care how the parents came to create them or where they're from. Those babies are Canadian. So it wasn't that we had empathy, compassion, or respect for any of you. I mean, of course we did, but that wasn't the issue. It was your baby is Canadian. I don't care about you. Your baby gets everything.
Cindy, as you know, we're seeing a trend also for Canadian surrogates to come to the USA for a transfer sometimes, or vice versa. Is there any legal issues there in terms of complications legally to doing that?
No, because they're having the baby back in Canada currently, and who knows when this will end. I and everybody hope soon. You must be fully vaccinated to enter the US. And so we do see a lot of donors and surrogates choosing not to vaccinate, not because they're anti-vaxxers in that way, but because there's a lot of concern about the potential impact on fertility. And it's anecdotal. And who knows, I mean, you know, I'm all vaccinated, but I'm scared, having done my children, that what I'm seeing is something to think about. So we were able to get exemptions for unvaccinated people to travel within Canada, and now you don't even need that. But right now they can't go to the US if they're not vaccinated. So if you've got a surrogate or a donor and embryos in the US, like one couple wrote to us before, and you absolutely love the surrogate and she's not vaccinated, ship your embryos to Dr. Liebrak, who's there now, and he has a whole department to do that. Or wait, because Biden is talking about relaxing that, but that's all talk, right? And with this new variant, who knows, people? But you don't have to, you know, within Canada.
Yeah, great.
So that's
well, thanks so much, Jenny. Great to talk to you about all this stuff. That's just wonderful.
Always. I'm going to go and start reading your book now, Sam.
Yeah, great. Do that. Terrific. All right.
All right, there's Dr. Liebrak.
Okay, so it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Clifford Liebrak to people, who's the medical director at Create Fertility in Canada, the largest clinic, you know, in terms of doing third-party reproduction, donor and embryos, and surrogacy. He's been working with growing families for many, many years now. He's going to talk us a bit through some of the considerations you guys should have from a medical point of view in terms of donors and surrogates. So welcome, Dr. Liebrak. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Sam, how long do I have? Just so I...
Oh, you got 20 minutes.
Okay, lovely. Okay, thank you so much. So I'll try to share my screen here. I'll do that in a second. Okay, share screen. Go. Perfect. Okay.
That's great.
Well, I think you can see the screen there. So is that right?
That's great.
Okay.
Yep, wonderful.
We'll just carry on with that way. All right. Well, I'm very honored to be here to talk to you about the egg and sperm and embryo quality factors that need to be considered when predicting success. And I'm the director, as Sam mentioned, of the Create Fertility Center. I'm also a professor in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the University of Toronto. And I'll be talking about eggs, then sperm, and then embryo quality. So of course, when IVF was first introduced to the world, it was called the test tube baby technology. And the two people from the UK that introduced it to the world were Steptoe and Edwards. And Edwards won a Nobel Prize in 2010 to describe in vitro fertilization. Unfortunately, Patrick Steptoe had already passed away by that time. But this was a huge change in the world and has allowed all the technologies that you're talking about today to occur. And Louise Brown, who's almost 45 years old and has her own children, was born in 1978. So when we do IVF, we try to mimic the situation that happens naturally through the reproductive tract of the woman. And so basically the ovulation occurs at the time, usually around the middle of the cycle. And then fertilization of the eggs occur through the fallopian tube towards the end of it. And during its travel through the fallopian tube for about 5 to 7 days, the embryo starts to divide. And by the second day of development, it's around 2 to 4 cells. And by day 3, it reaches around 5 to 10 cells. And then when it reaches the blastocyst stage, which is around day 5 to 7 of development, it's now about 80 to 100 cells in size. And that's when we can do all kinds of testing of the embryo, as we'll describe in the next slides. And the embryo implants and it hatches out of the outer coating called the zona pellucida. So this is what we try to mimic in vitro. So in order to do this, we have to retrieve the eggs, and the eggs are retrieved through a process that's under conscious sedation or sometimes general anesthesia. In our lab, it's conscious sedation. So your donor, if you're using an egg donor, would go through that. If it's your own eggs, then of course you would be going through that process either wherever you live, or if you came to Canada, we would do it here. So this shows a video of how the retract extraction of the egg occurs. And basically a needle goes into each sac, and the sac is shown is black on ultrasound. That represents fluid. So we stick the needle in, and then we suck out the fluid, and the egg is contained with that in that fluid. And the embryologists have to fish out the egg from that fluid in order to identify the eggs outside the body. And this is how we sort of do that. Now, this is what the eggs look like when they're outside the body under a microscope, and they have a coating called the zona pellucida, which sperm have to penetrate through in order to be able to fertilize the egg. Now, and we help that, and you'll see in a process when we do it with IVF in many cases. So factors affecting egg quality is the most important by far is age. And we know that as women age, the number, as shown in this graph, the number of eggs declines rapidly, especially after around the age of 35. Before that, it's a very slow decline, very little differences between women in their 20s, which is when usually the age of egg donors, 20s or early 30s. But when they reach the age of 35, there's a rapid decline. And that's something that affects our success rate because the number of eggs declines so rapidly. And the test that we do to check for the ovarian reserve is called the anti-Müllerian hormone, or AMH. And the response of the ovaries to that hormone is very highly correlated with AMH and the number of eggs. So when we screen egg donors, we want to have donors that have above certain levels that we feel is qualifies them to be a donor. And the higher the level, there tends to be a very high correlation with the number of eggs. So we're doing same-sex male couples. Of course, we want to make embryos for both of them, which is by far the most common process we see. We want to have donors that have a very high level of AMH potentially. Now, another factor is genetics. So genetics is very important. And we know that as women age, the number of miscarriages that occur from their eggs is increased pretty rapidly over time. And by the time someone is 45, about 50% of all their pregnancies will be a miscarriage. So obviously our egg donors are in a much younger age group, and those are the ones that will have a much lower rate of miscarriage, but they do have a significant rate of abnormalities in the embryos that's that's important to also consider. And so we see the reason for this miscarriage is because of the increased number of chromosomal abnormalities. As you may know, 46 is the normal, and when there's more than 46 or less, that's called aneuploidy, or the wrong number of chromosomes, basically. For Down syndrome, it's an extra 21, and that's by far the most common of the abnormalities that we see in humans. And for example, at someone who's in there about 35, it's about 1 in 380 for just Down syndrome, and at 40, it's about 1 in 100. And at 45, 1 in 30. So there's a rapid increase in the number of children that are born with Down syndrome, as well as all other chromosome abnormalities, if you include them, also contribute to these rates of abnormalities or miscarriage or just failure altogether. The other thing that can affect egg quality is the environment. And we can sometimes manipulate that. And one of the most important factors in an egg cell is the mitochondria. These are the energy packages that we have in all of the cells of our body, but the eggs have the most mitochondria of any cell in the body. And so there are compounds we can use to improve mitochondria function. And one of them is called, whoops, I missed the slide there, is coenzyme Q10. And that's a mitochondrial activator, as well as PQQ, which has a long name to it, but that's how we usually refer to it. And those two together act together to improve egg mitochondria. So when we have women that are older, we tend to use those to help their egg quality. And there's another compound that's a hormone that we all make in our bodies. In fact, it's the highest level of any hormone in your body when you're a teenager and young adults, called DHEA. Don't get confused with DHA, which is fish oil. It's completely different. And in fact, there are a lot of studies looking at using DHA to improve lifespan, to increase your longevity. And so that's an interesting aspect to it. But it basically is used in women that are older or have low reserve to help them. And in fact, it does cause a little bit higher sex drive, actually, and a bit of acne. So kind of like being a teenager again when you take it. Now, when we go into egg quality, we also must consider the stimulation protocol. That's a critical factor in terms of the quality of the eggs. And with women that have low reserve, we use minimal stimulation. Now, moving on to sperm, we also want to assess sperm quality, or think of ways that we can improve sperm quality. Well, sperm are produced in the testes, they go into the epididymis reservoir, and then they're ejaculated out through the vas deferens. And of course, a vasectomy is cutting off the vas deferens, so sperm are not ejaculated. And sperm look like this. They have a head and a tail, and they have an area of mitochondria, like I just mentioned for eggs, that allow them to move through the reproductive tract. And so what affects sperm quality? Well, the age has a very little effect. In fact, we did a very big study on looking at the eggs looking at the effective age on sperm quality with same-sex male couples when there was differences in ages, and we did not see any effect of age, and we're finding a very minimal effect overall with men's age. We also, of course, genetics also plays a role, and some types of infections can affect sperm quality, such as some sexually transmitted ones like gonorrhea or chlamydia, if they're around for a long time and not treated rapidly. Environment can also affect sperm quality, and we know that you are what you eat, sort of, and if you eat good foods and you have lots of antioxidants, they may reduce the sperm DNA fragmentation, which can affect the ability for sperm to fertilize an egg and also affect miscarriage rates. And so we use antioxidant supplements often in men that have a high DNA fragmentation, which is a test we do in our lab at Create. So how do we fertilize eggs? Once we have our eggs and our sperm, we can either mix them together with the eggs, and that can just allow them to fertilize on their own in the lab. But the rate of fertilization tends to be less than a technique we now use very often, which is called ICSI. And ICSI, or intracytoplasmic sperm injection, is shown here in a video. This is a pipette which is injected into the egg with a sperm inside, and we can use only one sperm is all we need to fertilize the egg in this situation, whereas we need millions of sperm to create fertilization in the natural situation. And so this allows us to have men that have very low sperm counts, even just a few that we can find in all of the ejaculate, and still have babies produced, which is pretty amazing. Now, what about selecting sperm when we actually want to use it to fertilize the egg? Well, the standard way is just using a simple microscope to select sperm by embryologists, but this can sometimes not work very well for some cases. And that's when men have a very high abnormal morphology or shape of the sperm. And in Create, like only very few clinics in the world, we have a technology we use for that called IMSI, which basically puts the sperm on a very, very high magnification and allows us to select only the morphologically best sperm to use. So that's helped a lot in those kinds of situations. So we do that morphology assessment in all sperm samples. We also are a pioneer in the area of selection of sperm, and we have a huge study going on robotic sperm selection, where we use a robotic system to select sperm, and we're getting very good results with that. So I'm very excited about that publication to come out soon in the next few months. So what happens after we fertilize the egg? Well, we have the combination of the egg and sperm nuclei, followed by division to the second cell, 2-cell stage, 4-cell stage. This is around the second day after fertilization. And then we also go to the third day, which is the stage of about 5 to 10 cells. And this shows an 8-cell embryo. Fourth day is called a morula, where the cells all kind of go together in a little group clump of cells that you can't really see the individual cells well. And the following 5 to 7 day period is when we see them develop into a blastocyst. And you'll hear this term blastocyst, which has fluid inside of it. That's called the blastocoeled cavity. And the cells around it, these are the cells that create the baby, this clump of cells called the inner cell mass, follow the trophectoderm outside, which forms the placenta and umbilical cord and membranes. And this is where we take samples to test for genetics. Once an embryo has developed into a blast, then in order to implant in the uterus, it hatches out of that coating I mentioned before, and it attaches to the uterus. And this is called a hatching blast. And we'll see them start to hatch in the lab. And this is really exciting when we see that, because we know that's going to have a very high chance of success. But how do we select embryos? Now we've got multiple embryos. How do we then select embryos from that group of embryos? So basically, of course, I'm sure this is going to work. Nope. Sorry, just 1 second. I think I can get this to work very quickly. Perfect. Okay, I think that works. Okay, sorry, I'm back to the beginning of the presentation. Now I can't. Okay, I'm going to probably have to just do it without the animation. So I'll go back to the slide we were on and just continue on. Okay, so basically, when we create embryos, we create embryos so that there are multiple embryos here, and they're all graded, which we call that static morphology. In other words, what does an embryo look like at the time we're about to freeze it? But it's not static. It's actually moving. It's changing every hour. And so this morphology assessment is very, very crude. It doesn't really correlate well with genetics, as I show in this slide. These two embryos on the left look identical if you look at them from a morphologic point of view, and they're both graded exactly the same, but one is a normal embryo and one is a baby that would be destined to have Down syndrome. And this second group is, again, embryos that look very similar, but the second embryo has an extra 21 and is missing 16, which is severely abnormal and would likely not result in a pregnancy at all. So there's a genetic testing that we can do on embryos called PGTA, or pre-implantation genetic testing for aneuploidy. We also, in our lab, we have one of the top labs in the world to do this kind of genetic testing at Create. We can also test for all single gene defects, for if you have a family history of cystic fibrosis, Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, sickle cell disease, and so on. We can test for thousands and thousands of genes. And we can also test for embryos when people have what's called a structural rearrangement or translocation. We can test that in embryos as well. So we have the ability to test virtually anything genetic in an embryo. And this shows a graph from Mooney in 2016, the increased rate of abnormalities with age that we see in embryos. And we have looked at this in our own lab with thousands and thousands of embryos, and now we've got many, many more than this. But at this time, we saw that about 30% of embryos were abnormal in the young egg donor age group. At 35, it's about 50%. At 40, it's about 70%. And it's almost 100% when you go over 45. So this rapidly increases, as I mentioned, with age. This is the critical issue with age. So what happens is that we grow the embryos. And when we freeze them using a technology called vitrification, before we freeze them, we can take a small sampling called a biopsy of 5 cells. In fact, we now are developing a technique called non-invasive, which we may be able to not use these cell biopsies. But basically, we do thousands of these biopsies in the lab, and the success rate of biopsy is very high. And we freeze them by a technique called vitrification. And vitrification is a rapid freeze, like into a glass-like state. And embryos have a hugely high survival rate, almost about 97%, 98% survival using this technology. So frozen embryos really have the same success as frozen as fresh embryos. And we also can do this with eggs when we have egg banks as well. And so we also, so this shows what a biopsy looks like. And basically the embryo has this sort of bulging of cells from it, and a pipette is used to grasp those cells. And then we use a laser to remove the cells from the embryo. And the embryo does extremely well after this technique. And we use a technology called next generation sequencing to tell if an embryo is normal or not. This shows one that has an extra 16. I don't have time, obviously, to go through how this technology works, but it's very, very effective. And we found with young egg donors that about 25.8% are aneuploid. And we also have a group of embryos that are called mosaics, which I'll talk about in a second, which are kind of in between normal and aneuploid or abnormal number of chromosomes. And so when people look at the success with these technologies, they found over the years that PGTA, or this technology, increases implantation rate. It also reduces miscarriage rate. Obviously, if you're putting embryos in that are not genetically abnormal, you're going to have a much lower rate of miscarriages. And you're also reducing the number of embryos you have to put in the first place to achieve a pregnancy. And nowadays we virtually always put one embryo at a time, especially with surrogacy, where the person is carrying this baby to help you have a baby, but not to put her own health at risk. And having twin pregnancies that are premature can have severe long-term health problems. So we always try to avoid multiple births when we do when we use a surrogate, or just anyone who's carrying their own baby as well, of course. So the PGTA technology allows us then to test whether the embryo is normal or euploid, and whether it's aneuploid, and whether it's mosaic, which I'll mention in a second. But we have another technology to then choose among the normal embryos, because you may have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 normal embryos. How do we choose among those? Well, we have another technology which is called the embryoscope. It's a time-lapse technology that takes a digital photo of each embryo every 20 minutes. We get a time-lapse movie. I always joke that we can even give you a movie of your baby on a memory stick and show your kid what they look like as an embryo. It's pretty incredible. But of course, we're not doing it just to have that souvenir. We're doing it to choose embryos that are more likely to be implant among the normal embryos. So this is what 2 embryos side by side look like when they're growing under that embryoscope. And so it takes this digital photo every 20 minutes. And we can look at each embryo and do this really cool analysis called morphokinetic analysis. So we can choose embryos that are growing better than another among the normals. Because if you have 10 normal embryos, let's say, how do we know which one of those to choose? Well, this technology allows us to do this. And it was developed actually in Denmark. There are other technologies that are similar, but the one that was developed in Denmark, called the embryoscope, is the best that we have. And we have many of those in our lab. So we can score the embryos along the bottom here that are normal. And of course, an embryo that's 10 is going to be the highest score. An embryo that's 3, these are both normal embryos along the first and the third, but the first one has a higher score. So we pick that one over the second one. And then the next thing we can do, so basically we can say that the embryoscope itself and the genetic testing sort of complement each other. So we can test for the genetic testing normal or abnormal. And with the embryoscope, we can test if the embryo that's normal is growing better than another embryo. So basically, we can use those together. Now, what about these mosaic embryos? Everyone talks about mosaic embryos. And these are embryos where some of the cells in the biopsy are normal and some are abnormal. And what we know is that we've transferred thousands of thousands over the years because we didn't have the technology to know they were mosaic embryos. But we know now that these babies are all normal so far in the world. They have been normal, but they have a higher risk of miscarriage. And we have one of the largest series in the world of mosaic embryo transfers that we're going to be publishing very soon. So we use the normal embryos always first, but these are our second choice if we don't have any normal ones left. So we can use them. So what about those cases where it's not working? We do all this technology, sounds great, but it's still not working. What happens there? Well, we have to decide what is the problem. Is it the chicken or the egg? Well, in fact, eggs, I don't know if what you had for breakfast this morning was eggs, but you were actually not eating eggs, you were eating embryos, because an egg is really a chicken egg is really a fertilized embryo. So is it chicken or the embryo? And we don't have time to go through what it could be in the surrogate or the woman carrying the baby today, but of course the rooster, the sperm has a very important factor, as I mentioned before. So we have to narrow it down to whether it's sperm, rooster, or embryo. So chicken, rooster, or embryo, to use this an analogy. Of course, this is the ideal outcome. We want to have a beautiful, healthy baby, and this would be in a heterosexual couple. We sometimes have two roosters, of course, and as many of you probably in the audience are looking for, that beautiful baby between the two of you. And of course, we can have two chickens too, of course. So why choose Canada? I'm just gonna, this is my final slide just to give you sort of an overview of why Canada has, and you're gonna hear that from some of our other people that are on this panel, but basically cost, we have a much lower dollar than they do in the US if you're comparing to the US. So it's about 50% of the cost compared to there. We have guarantee programs in our clinic with one baby, two babies, and even 1+1, where we have a same-sex couple that want a baby for each of them, which is by far the most common desire for same-sex couple in our experience. Quality, we have inspections. Canadian government is very on top of us always to make sure we're doing the highest quality care of our patients, and we have very high success rates. We accept embryos from all other countries. Unlike the US where they have FDA restrictions, we can have embryos. We've had embryos from Ukraine and everywhere in the world, basically, as long as that country will allow the embryos to be shipped. That's one factor we don't have control over, obviously. It's also a relatively short time to find donors, and you can sometimes find a donor in days to weeks, and then surrogates average is about 3 to 8 months. So, and we have an excellent create a communication system where your own nurse will be communicating with you directly and be helping to look after your donor, your surrogate, together with yourselves and myself as a team all together to help you have this beautiful baby. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and if there's no time for questions, that's fine, but I would entertain if you have time.
Great, thanks so much, Dr. de Brock. That's terrific. There was a few questions coming through on the Q&A tab, if you could just maybe look at those. But that's really interesting. There's some things in there I hadn't seen before, so it's great to see how much you can do just to test those embryos. It's amazing. We're now going to turn to what happens to those embryos in terms of the kids. And what we are quite famous for doing is panels of children born by surrogacy. Normally those panels are consisting of 18, 19, 20-year-olds, sometimes 24-year-olds. We did an experiment this year, and we actually hosted a panel of 11-year-olds born via surrogacy, either altruistic or commercial surrogacy, born via to either gay dads or heterosexual couples. And we ran this at our Sydney conference a few months ago, and it was such a popular